You are now tuned in to the Prescription for Purpose podcast, the #1 podcast for Christian women to learn how to apply God's principles to fulfill your God-ordained purpose. Every episode will empower you with the tools and wisdom necessary so you can strategically execute and excel in every area of your life. This is the place for you to learn how to walk in purpose, to walk with purpose, and to fulfill God's purpose. Hey sis, and welcome to another episode of the Prescription for Purpose podcast. Today we are following up and wrapping up our interview with Tatum Temia Ayomike and discussing how to be a woman who is uncompromising. I pray that y'all really enjoyed last week's episode. It was just so rich and so good and so necessary. I love how God always shows up and just takes control of every conversation. If you have not already, make sure that you head over to Amazon or wherever you get your books from and make sure that you check out Tatum's book, She is Uncompromising. It is a phenomenal book and is outlined with just amazing strategy and tools to help you live an uncompromising life. So without further ado, this is part 2 of our interview with Tatum Temia Ayomike.
In the book, I talk about strongholds. And it was so important to me when writing this book to allow the word of God to be the true text and then only add my 2 cents as relevant and as appropriate to what the word of God says. I feel like a lot of times in faith settings, you get the opposite, where people put together these messages, they write these books, and then you find scripture that just supports what you're trying to say, as opposed to making your opinions and what you want to communicate fit the word of God. And so I wanted to talk about it. Initially, I set out to talk about compromise as a stronghold, but where I got as I studied was somewhere totally different. And as I was studying the word and just looking at the different instances where strongholds are being presented, because from my experience, being in church settings, strongholds were always presented as something that needed to be cast out. And essentially, in some instances, they are. So we have to cast out the stronghold of human reasoning, it talks about in Corinthians. But what I saw more was God being referenced as a stronghold, our strong tower, our place of refuge. By definition, stronghold is a fortified place that is protected against attack. And as I was just studying this and then studying God as the stronghold versus always looking at it as something that presents itself negatively, what I realized is that so many times we fortify our fears versus fortifying our faith.
Mm.
And so instead of allowing God to be in resting in him, because again, a stronghold is a place that's fortified against attack. It's a protected place. That's the benefit that we have when we are abiding in God. When we're resting in him, we're safe, we're protected. But oftentimes, instead of taking these thoughts captive, we're allowing them to take root. And then what happens is we uproot God as our stronghold, and then this human reasoning, these demonic influences then become strongholds that we got to pray, fast, and work to cast out.
That's so good.
And I'm like, why were these things not taught simultaneously? Because how can we talk about uprooting without talking about planting?
Come on.
And I'm like, man, and it kind of made me mad a little bit. I'm like, we get so underserved sometimes.
Yeah.
In these faith-based settings. I'm sitting here reading my word and my mind was blown. And I think you talked about this before too, where it's like we focus so much, especially in talking about spiritual warfare, on the name of the demon, the
we know everything.
We know the whole personality, the resume, the track record. When all we need to know is that some things only come out through prayer and fasting. We need to know the solution, which we have. But we're spending so much time focusing on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Entertaining and getting to know a demon that we have the authority to cast out easily.
Come on, because baby, you know what that demon wants on Netflix. Like, what? How did we get here? Like, how did we get here? But you don't know your word, which is your sword.
Exactly.
We get so fanatical over demonic principalities, and I don't care what your name is. You got to go.
You
in the name
gotta
of
go.
Jesus. Like, period. You got to go. Mm-mm. We way too familiar with these demonic spirits. Like, and people are making money off of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's something that I feel, especially when we talk about the area of compromise. When I had that revelation, I was asking God, like, why do we not, like, why do we blame the devil for everything? Like, we give him way too much credit. like let Lucy get too much credit for a lot of the stuff that happens. And a lot of times it's not like the devil, it's your decisions, but you don't want to take accountability for the things that you're in control of. So you rather say that the devil got you late for work when you know you hit snooze 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, you should have went to bed earlier. You lack discipline. It's not the devil. And so I try to be more cautious in understanding that this battle isn't just with the enemy. You're fighting the enemy, and then you also have to tame your flesh.
Yeah.
And it's that middle piece that we don't like to deal with, because we like what we like. And quite honestly, the things that we may compromise in our culture, our eating, our exercise, you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you enjoy the sin, and you
Yeah.
don't want to say that. So
We have
you
to be honest. We
Mhm.
have to be honest. I love lamb chops. I love steak. I don't eat meat because it doesn't make me feel good, and it doesn't make my body operate at the level that it needs to for what God is calling me to do. So while I love it, I just simply can't.
Yeah,
And it's not to say that I'll, be vegan forever, but for right now, I went to God with my problem and said, "Lord, I don't feel good. I feel like I don't see how I'm not up to or feeling like I can truly perform the way that you need me to. Like, God, I'm having these headaches. I feel sluggish. I'm getting rest. I'm exercising. What's the problem?" And he showed me my diet.
yeah,
So I would have loved to continue to eat the way that I was eating before, but I just cannot. It's as simple as that. And when we talk about, how do you deal with the emotions and things like that, these things become strongholds when you don't deal with them.
yeah,
These thoughts begin to take root and take the place of God when you don't cast them out immediately. These
yeah.
behaviors become strongholds that you have to pray and fast and get rid of when you don't deal with them immediately. And honestly, all these are distractions that keep us from what it is that we're supposed to be doing.
Come on.
How much faster would we get to our promise if we just mastered ourselves in our flesh and got disciplined?
Yep, yep. And the only way you can do that is through your relationship with God. All these
Yeah.
other places and spaces are making millions, billions. Like, you paying $9.97 for every conference, and you exactly the same after.
Exactly.
It's unnecessary. But when you go to Galatians 5, it says that self-control is a fruit of the spirit. You
Mm,
cannot tame your flesh without Christ.
yep.
Like, how are you trying to tame something that you don't even know for real?
Hmm.
Because what God has shown me, He has taught me more about me in the last 5 years. And I've been me my whole life. Like, He's like, nah, girl, this is why you be tripping. I was like, you know what? You was so right. You
Hmm.
so right. This is why this or that. And I love that you even bring up distraction, because it's one of those areas that it really was something that I struggled with. And I love in the book that you say that fear and anxiety, it forbids freedom. And
Yeah.
a lot of times that is exactly what happens. When I looked up that scripture in Philippians that talks about be anxious for nothing, that word anxious means to be distracted, divided into separate parts.
Yeah.
So I can't focus on doing what God has called me to do. I can't focus on walking without compromise because I'm distracted and being pulled 17 different ways.
Hmm.
And so it's so important that we understand that we can't just pull things up and not plant the right fruit, not
Yeah.
plant the right seed. That's a very dangerous thing to do, because the enemy, as much as he loves all the brouhaha, like, child, he knows that we will self-destruct. Some of
Yeah.
it is the enemy, is your flesh. He don't need to touch you because you're touching yourself. Like, you know, since you got it. You got it. I'm good over here.
You got it. And so the minute that you decide that you're no longer going to compromise, all hell will break loose, because
Mhm.
now you're in direct fire for of the enemy. But that's not the time to shrink back. And so they do underserve us, child. Like, I'm so glad I'm at a church where I get taught, like,
Mhm.
not just stuff that's tweetable, but stuff that is going to make sure that when I leave here Monday through Saturday, I have I have what I need.
Yeah.
I have what I need, because it's wild out here. The instructions don't get easier.
No, they don't. They
It's
don't.
the
And you have to
mistakes.
know the word. You have to,
Yeah.
that's why I said the foundation of it all is having a relationship with God. There's
Yep.
no way around it.
Yep. Yep. You have to get in your word. We had a fast recently in the society. And if you're not in the society, girl, you tripping, okay? But we had a fast recently, and somebody said, I got more out of this 1999 membership than this conference I went to where I paid $9.97.
Mhm.
And it like struck me like, dang, it made me feel good about the work that we do in the society. And also, it's like, what does that say about the body of Christ at large, though? That
Mhm.
people are out here profiting off of the need of people, like the needs that we have, and you're not being prepared. Like,
Yep.
it's one thing if I'm truly preparing you, right? Everything shouldn't be free, or everything shouldn't be low cost. Like, if you have a skill, use it. But it's the fact that people are leaving unprepared and not with the things that they need and the practicality. And so, like, that's why I love like this book and what we do in the society. It's just that we have to make this practical. Like, this life is to be lived.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be overworked, overwhelmed, like, you like that. Those are not your portion. So I love that we don't have to compromise. We do have to take responsibility and get in our word. so,
Mhm.
so there's a work that's required. What would be the first course of action for someone who is multi-talented and multi-purposed, right? Like, you do several things and you still are a mama and a
Mhm.
wife. What would
Mhm.
be the first thing or the first course of action for someone who's like, girl, there's stuff everywhere and I just don't even know where to start?
So let me start here. I always knew, I told you this whole concept of being uncompromising started by seeds being planted when I was young. I always knew that I wanted to be successful. Later on, maybe like after college, is when I knew I wanted to be successful in business because I wasn't sure. But once I knew entrepreneurship is where I wanted to be successful, and I knew I wanted to have a successful family, I'm always thinking very far ahead. So I knew, okay, before I get married, I want to make sure that I have a brand and a business and a name of my own, because I don't want to go straight into being somebody's wife without establishing myself as an individual. That was very important to me because I've seen so many women lose their identity in these titles. So I'm telling you guys what I did before first, because I know there are people who are listening here who aren't married yet or who don't have kids yet. So a big priority for me was I'm not getting married until I have something established for myself. So I checked those things off. After I got married, I said, okay, I'm not having children until my business is making a certain amount of money, because I want to be able, I don't want to still be trying to figure out how I'm going to make money. I don't want to still be trying to fit, like, I can't live. I knew that I couldn't live the same lifestyle being behind my computer all day from sun up to sundown nonstop like I was before. Like, my husband is an accountant, and so with his work, they had busy seasons, which was great for me because he'll be working nonstop because that's the season they're in. That's great because I get to work nonstop and don't have to hear that I'm not present at home or anything like that. And so it worked out well. And he traveled a lot for work, so I would travel with him. I'm like, you going where? Say less. We got a room. You got your flight. All we got to do is get my flight. So I would travel with him while he's at work. I'm behind my computer. So it was great. But my rule was, again, I'm not having kids until my business is making a certain amount of money. And so once that started happening, where we were generating consistent income, I had like contractors that were helping me out. So I was at a good place where I'm like, okay, great. Now I can have kids. So I think those preliminary decisions really, really helped, as opposed to just hopping right into stuff and not and doing it blindly.
Yeah.
And even when I had my first child, all the plans that I made for my first child were with the mindset of I want to have more kids.
Yeah.
Best case scenario for me, I would love to have 4 kids. Maybe even I always wanted to adopt. So I was like, maybe I'll do three, children I birth and then adopt one. If I got enough money and space and my body can do it, let me do four and adopt one. But I always knew I wanted to have multiple children. So when I started making plans for my first child, I did everything with the intention of having multiple kids. So when it came to hiring our nanny, can you handle multiple kids? Because if not, like, it's no point of us starting here and then
Mhm.
I'm stressing myself out later down the line because you can't handle having more than, taking care of more than one child. Or how does my household need to run? In my mind, I'm just always thinking well in advance. So that way, when I get to where I'm going, and not to the point where it's like too stressful, because I think in the beginning when you're planning stuff out for the future, you can do it without the pressure of it happening right away.
Yeah.
And so you can do it just, with a lot clearer mind. And so those were just some of the preliminary things that I did. Now, after that, I still couldn't pre-plan for everything because, kids especially, they be like, oh, you thought this was going to go this way? Psych.
You tried it.
Welcome to your new life. I run you.
And you pay my bills.
Exactly. Your life revolves around me. Welcome. So, and so you definitely can prepare, but so much when it comes to the kids part in particular. But even going back before I get there, choosing who I was going to marry was very intentional. To me, marriage was not about, I didn't even want a wedding, but my husband is Nigerian and they don't play that. You going to have a wedding.
Okay.
So our compromise was a destination wedding because I wanted to just go somewhere and elope and it just be us. So essentially, we still went somewhere, but everybody else just happened to be on vacation with us, and we had the destination wedding. But we still eloped and got married prior to our wedding. But even choosing who I was going to marry, I knew that I needed to marry somebody that wasn't like super big or sold on gender roles, to where, oh, I'm not cooking anything because that's what a woman is supposed to do. I'm not helping around the house or helping with the kids. That's what I already knew that was not finna work.
At all.
So I need somebody who I knew was open to our marriage being a true partnership.
Yeah.
I knew that I needed somebody who was not intimidated by my ambition, who wasn't going to be jealous of me because of the big dreams that I had. So I knew that I needed somebody who knew the Lord for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm submitted to you, I got to know who you following, and you got to know who you following for yourself. I'm not going to be saved for the both of us,
Come on.
because what I need you for? Like, you know what I mean? So
Exactly.
I knew that I needed somebody who knew God. And so those were just a few prerequisites that I had, but overall, choosing who I was going to marry was huge. I'm gonna be a little blunt here. Most women find themselves in a stressful state of trying to handle everything because you didn't marry the right person.
Come on. Tell the truth.
And you just didn't. Now, what you do with that information is between you and the Lord. But, but that is a fact for many
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah.
I do believe that God can do miracles. So
Mm-hmm.
when I say that what you do with that is between you and the Lord, I mean really going to war for your home. But anyway, now after having these things, like I said, have kids will come in and be like, "Ha, you thought this was gonna go one way." So even then, once you feel, because I feel like no matter how much you plan, most of the time you might get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm losing the grip on things. And that's where I found myself. And I talked about this in the book, where I was like, it was a moment I was sitting in front of my whiteboard and I was crying. I was writing things down and my tears was erasing them away. And I felt so stressed out and so just overwhelmed. And so for the person who finds yourself in this position where it's like, my life is running me and I'm not in control of my life, I always say step one is just take a step back and take inventory. You have to just kind of sit it all down and take a step back for a second. You can't try to fix things while you're in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Some things, of course, you can't control. Like the kids got to get fed. Like, you got to take your children to school. You have to manage your responsibilities at home. You can't just stop existing. But as much as you can, take a step back. Maybe it's, I'm going to take off work for 2 days so that I can figure this out. Kids is at school, Hubs is at work. Let me just take a step back, or let me take a weekend and go to a hotel for a weekend, or go somewhere and just really take a step back to see what is going on here. And so that's what I had to do. I was like, God, now I know this ain't supposed to feel like this.
Mm-hmm.
So what we doing? Where am I getting this wrong? And God began to just show me where I was getting it wrong and put the pieces together for me. And so I explained like the whole process in the book of like taking inventory and accounting for your time and all of those things in the book. But the first step was really just taking a step back, allowing God to examine me and show me myself, and then
Mm-hmm.
moving upon those things.
Yep. I love that. As you were speaking, the first thing that really pops into my mind is that in order for you to live a life that's uncompromising, you have to first set whatever the standard is going to be. Like you had standards already set.
Yeah.
Like you were like, nah, this is how this has got to work. And a
Yeah.
lot of times we don't even consider those things, right? And so you can't plan it out to a T. However, what I can do is know, like, yo, this ain't gonna work. Like this right here is absolutely, I'm out. Shark Tank me because I'm out. Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. So the minute you're dating that man, you can't wait till you're in it to then try to set standards for what's going to be
Listen,
acceptable
when I
for
tell you, I would ask all of my deal breaker questions over like the first couple of dates. Cause like I can just roll out before I like you for real.
you. Yeah.
And I remember I was celibate because I was newly saved. And I was like, all right, God, I'm gonna try this. And I would date guys and I was like, how do you feel about celibacy? And not trying to make them feel like they had to be celibate for me. I just wanted to know what you thought about it on your own without the pressure of me putting anything on it. And I remember a couple guys that I dated would be like, oh, sure, I could never do that. Like I'm like, oh, okay, that's what's up. We never going out again.
Facts.
Because even, I mean, that was definitely a struggle for me. But at the bare minimum, if you can't have enough self-control to where you are at least open to it, to be like, I mean, that'll be hard, but it depends on what we're doing it for. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. I don't expect you to be like, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, maybe if y'all met the man in church and he's super saved already, he might be on that, but that's just not where I was
He
at
can
that
still be
time.
a weirdo. Just because he at church don't mean they actually need to be vetted a little bit more strictly. Because whoa, Lil Lucy be having the ops in church.
I know. I feel like if I met a man back then and I was dating and they were like, oh, I would never give my body before marriage. I'd be like, oh, nah, we packing it up.
If you can't just say good morning to me without quoting scripture, it's a no. It's a no. It's a no for me. Oh my
And
god.
something I would say going back to though, to just managing all the things, a big part of it too is priorities and protecting those priorities. And I'll talk about that in the book. It's one thing to say, oh, God is first, my family, then my business, but you don't even have systems in place to protect those things.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that God is your number one priority, but you don't even protect the time to spend with him. That doesn't make sense to me. Our words and our priorities have to be backed up by our actions.
That's good.
And that's done by creating these priorities. So for me, or creating these boundaries around those priorities. So for me, God is my number one priority. I wake up before my family every single day. I've been doing that for years. I cannot wake up. My son cannot be my alarm clock. He just can't, because if that happens, then I'm starting my day in a reactive state. as opposed to a proactive state where I'm able to wake up early, have my quiet time with God, get my thoughts together before I have to put on one of my responsibilities. And so even with that, with my home, I don't work on the weekends. It's a boundary. I even with my son, my rules are he has to see me when he wakes up and he has to see me before going to bed. That don't mean I'm out all day, but that just means that those are my boundaries. If anybody needs me, if that interferes with BJ does the bedtime routine, but if that interferes with me getting my hugs and kisses and snuggles in before, BJ takes over for the stories and things, I can't do it. If I'm out first thing in the morning doing stuff for everybody else and he don't even know me because I'm not spending that quality time with him, I just simply can't do it. So making sure you protect those boundaries are important. So with my work schedule, I don't work before like 11 and I don't work after 4:30. So my business has a boundary. Now, the reality of most people not being able to do that is that you're not good with your time. You're not good at being productive. And if that's the problem, then that means we need to find a solution for it, right? So with my business, I had got to the point when I established these boundaries, as I started, putting the things in place to protect them, I realized that I had some flaws in my business to where I was being burnt out because my business required way too much of me to run. And I was frustrated by it because I was like, I have to be the talent. I got to be the voice on the podcast, the face on the YouTube videos, creating all of this content for social media. I have to do all of these things and be the strategist and serve our clients and all of that. I didn't like it. And so when it came to my business model had to change where I'm like, okay, we need to prioritize business to business income over business to consumer, because business to business income, it's bigger checks for less work, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Business to consumer is when you got to do all of this extra stuff online and all of that in order to make the sale. I don't like that. And so I'm like, okay, I have to change some things with my business. So what are my business to business income streams right now? And how do we grow them? How do I create more? So one of the things we started doing, even with managing podcasts, where now that's a huge revenue stream for us. And I don't even have to look for clients. I can't even keep up with the people that come to us. So just even revisiting or even podcast ads, let's just continue to grow this platform because that's more money that'll be made for that. And that's a B2B relationship, and just constantly being on the lookout to grow that part of the business. But that was created based on me protecting these boundaries and realizing, oh crap, it's still not enough. So what other problems do I solve? And so that made me have to go into the business to fix it so that I can be productive from the 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. schedule.
Hi, this is Elton John here. Throughout my US tour last year, we heard from thousands of fans that financial security and financial planning are hugely important to them. So important that David and I are continuing this vital conversation into 2023. Together with the Alliance for Lifetime Income, I'm spreading the word about the importance of protected income, which is money you're guaranteed to get. Like me, I'm sure you have big plans for your next chapter. Protected income from an annuity helps ensure you have all your bases covered so you can have the financial freedom to tick off your bucket list. The first step is to decide what's on your bucket list. Then, meet with your financial advisor to ask if you have protected income and get their help making a plan that fits your unique financial goals. Join me and my friends at the Alliance for Lifetime Income. Together, we can help make financial freedom in retirement a reality for more Americans, starting with you. Go to protectedincome.org today.
So it's a lot of work. It takes being very intentional. And in the book, I lay out the whole process, but I would be lying to you if I said that it's easy, that it's simple, that it's overnight, because it's not. It takes being very intentional. It takes discipline, and discipline twofold. I talk about this in a book where in Proverbs, I forgot the scripture I gave, but I gave a scripture on discipline, and I talk about discipline being twofold. One, you need to have the discipline in the sense of executing and getting things done, but you also need to be open to discipline from God.
Come on.
And allowing him to show you yourself and to correct you as you're on this journey. So again, it's not easy, but it's very, very intentional.
Yeah.
And a part of being uncompromising is not the cute part of I'm going to go after everything that I want. It's despite how hard this is, how impossible this may feel, I am not settling for it not happening. So we need to figure this out.
Come on.
And that was my moment of being in front of that whiteboard. I'm like, God, ain't no way. Ain't no way. I prayed for this. I talk about my journey to becoming pregnant in the book and dealing with miscarriages and all of these things. I'm like, God, ain't no way that we went through all of this and you performed a miracle in my body for me to be stressed like this. It ain't no way that I shut down my business and I surrendered my ambition to you and I let you build everything you've allowed me to build with Anchored Media, that I followed you, I obeyed you, I've seen the fruit of what happens with that. Ain't no way we've done all of these miracles together. You've done all these miracles by me just simply saying yes and being committed for me to be feeling closed in. So I'm the problem. There's something that I'm doing that is not working. Correct me.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there with that whiteboard in tears, like, God, show me where I am getting it wrong. Let's write this out because I refuse to believe that this is it. And I'm not backing down from none of it. I ain't putting the business down. I'm not putting my family down. So what are we doing? And God just built it out. And even still, that's moments, and this is not something you do once. As life changes, you got to reevaluate.
Yep.
So as you know, your circumstances may change. You have more children. Your husband may be in a different place than what he has going on. Life evolves, but you go back to it. God, what are we doing?
I love that.
So that's the biggest thing. Everybody, I think, is looking for productivity hacks. It's plenty of practical stuff in the book. You know, everybody's looking for the next productivity hack, the next software that's going to solve all their problems to avoid them doing the hard things, asking the hard questions, and putting in hard work.
Baby, ain't no software when you're the drama.
Okay. It is.
I love that. I always tell God, I'm like, this can't be the life Jesus died for me to have.
Mm-mm.
Like, no. And because if anything in my life is presenting opposite from what God's word says, I know there's a problem, and I know the problem ain't God.
Yeah.
He's perfect. So we have that established. So if he says that his burden is easy and his yoke is light, and I'm not feeling light, and this don't feel easy in terms of like, I have the grace to do it, because you're going to make hard choices. But if it's like overwhelmed, oh no, we'd have made a left turn somewhere. GPS reroute, please, because it's giving very much ghetto. Now, one thing I think that you did an excellent job at in the book is talking about the Proverbs 31 woman, because this is one of those things where we are underserved. They present the Proverbs 31 woman as this perfect wife who does all the things. And boy, she will make you bacon, she will bust it down, and she will make you a dress at the same time. And so women, I know for me, I felt like it was something that was like unattainable. What was your biggest like aha moment as you studied the Proverbs 31 woman? And how did that differ from like how you've seen this woman being presented in faith spaces?
I always saw her being presented as somebody who did all the things. And that's why you got to open the Bible up for yourself. But I always saw it as this woman who did all the things. Like, she was the homemaker. She was successful in enterprising. She was just, like you said, busted it down, doing all of the things. But she really wasn't doing all of the things. She was structured. She was organized. She was intentional with what she did. And she made sure that everything, she was not a multitasker. She was a multiplier. And that was a big revelation for me. When I tell you the Proverbs 31 is marked up so much in my Bible, like I probably need a new page, just that one. Because I'm going to have to go back again at some point, and I need fresh space to keep breaking it down.
Yeah.
But the biggest takeaway and aha moment was, again, she's a multiplier and not a multitasker. She was structured in how she did things. And so many women, we multitask. We're answering emails while we're cooking dinner. We're doing all of these things. And even statistically, multitasking does not do anything.
Yep.
You're not being more productive. You're not getting more done. You're halfway doing 10 things at once and nothing is actually being done well or in a focused way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're multiplying, you're making sure that the things that you are spending your time on, you're getting a return on investment. So when I'm working in my business, I'm focused, ain't nobody bothering me, and everything that I do is going to have to give me a return on investment. I don't have time to do idle things in my business. It needs to make me money.
Come on.
So when I'm dealing with faith-based people and they show up, man, I've had people show up to events and be like, God sent me here. And I'm like, well, God need to send you back with the ticket money because you're not coming in here. And now that's not to say that God doesn't lead. God got to tell me. I've done many things offline as far as giving and even doing things for free for people. So don't nobody be on here trying to look at me crazy because my name is good in these streets. And I don't talk about them because it's not for me to talk about. But when it comes to business, it's business. Yeah. Every second that I'm spending in my business is taken away from my family.
Yeah.
There's a cost to everything. So it's not like it has to multiply.
Yeah. God is a God of multiplication.
He is. When in the parable of talents or investments is my favorite translation of it. The only one that got the well done is the one who multiplied the most. And the one who didn't multiply at all had the most to say.
Yeah.
Well, thou amazing Father who knows all, and like, why?
I know you're a harsh man. Like, sir,
you saying all of this to say you ain't do it right. You ain't you just buried it. You ain't multiplied it.
I love God. He was like, you could at least put it in the bank, though.
Exactly. You could at least put it in a savings account and got you 0.5%.
Something.
You ain't do nothing.
But all of it was multiplication.
All
the
of it.
The 5 went to 10, the 2 went to 4, and the 0, you can't multiply nothing with 0.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The first command was to be fruitful and multiply.
Exactly. And it ain't just about having babies.
It's not.
And so the Proverbs 31 woman, she inspected. So she wasn't just doing stuff. She was paying attention. She counted the cost. Mm-hmm. She made sure that her dealings were profitable.
Yeah.
She inspected the land before she bought. She wasn't just out here started a business because it sounded good. In my program, my coaching program, she's Uncompromising. I had somebody who this blessed me so much. In this program, we focus on the business of business, not all of the cute stuff, the fun stuff, the stuff that's sexy online, but the real things that's going to help you build a sustainable business. And somebody had said, we had a group session, and she was like, after doing the first few assignments, I realized I don't want to do this. And I was like, that is music to my ears.
Yep.
Because what you just saved yourself was time, was money, was energy, was effort. All of this, you did the work and you realized this costs too much. Yeah. This is going to cost me my way of life. I thought I wanted to do this, but when I look at the reality of what this is going to take, I don't think that this is it. And I was so blessed by that because that was just wisdom.
Yeah.
But so many of us skip that because you go straight to what seems cool, man. We cannot be silly women, foolish women who just do things just to do them, who go about life willy-nilly. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
Yeah. I love that because even in my nonprofit consulting, my client was like, girl, if I had known this, she's already started and committed. So she's like, if I would have known this before, I probably wouldn't have done it. Mm-hmm. And I think that it not only speaks to a level of us not doing the work, I think it also speaks to how these quote unquote coaches and gurus are out here capitalizing on your excitement to make money. Mm-hmm. Because I'm going to give you the tea. Like, you thought we about to come in here and I was going to give you Instagram strategies. No, baby, where's your strategic plan? Like, let's write that out. Like, your program has to be developed. And before you talk about you want to write a grant, here's what's required for the grant. We went over a federal grant application and she was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, I'm not just telling you to do these things because I'm telling you this is what's required if you want to operate in this space. And so not only does it speak to our lack of doing our own homework, it also speaks to how the enemy will always send some kind of counterfeit to make it seem like you'll be smarter and wiser and all this, and then you bite the fruit, and now look at us looking crazy. And so I love that it just speaks to the integrity of your program, to where people can make decisions to be like, nah, pimp, this ain't for me.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Because if we're all entrepreneurs, who's going to work at these jobs?
Exactly.
Like, it's fine. Run your race. Like, stay in your lane and run your race.
That's it.
And we don't have to get caught up what the algorithm says. Run your race, though. You may just want to volunteer at a nonprofit. And if my business is the space and the place that saves you hundreds of thousands of like hours and tears and all, like, good, yes, I'm so happy that blessed you and blessed her. Because, child, it's ghetto. Entrepreneurship is not all shiny. Like, it's just not all the things.
I had to tell somebody else. I'm like, check this out.
Yeah.
Like, it's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
You either in and you're going to do the things that needs to get done, or you're not.
Yeah.
Because I had to tell somebody, like, at this point, you're presenting me with an excuse. All I'm hearing are excuses.
Yeah.
And in order to be a successful entrepreneur, we don't find excuses. We find opportunities. We solve problems. We don't complain about them. So you might not be built for this. And I don't like to tell people that. I really don't. But sometimes it just has to be said. You might not be built for this if you want to complain and not find solutions. Just go ahead, sit at your cubicle, do your 30 years or however long you need to, retire, live your life. It ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yep. No shame.
It ain't no shame in a hardworking person that go and they punch their clock, they do what they got to do. They go home to their family, they make a good living. There is nothing wrong with that. And the internet has made, entrepreneurship and generational wealth and all of this money and all of that. There is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being an honest, hardworking person. When you do your part of your job, you ain't got to worry about payroll. You ain't got to worry about clients being late. There's so much you just got to worry about what your job description say.
Yeah.
If I could do that, I would 100% do that. If that was my calling, I would be living my life from 9 to 5, watching my Netflix in the background while I did my little job, and I will go home.
Come on.
Go on vacation, take my PTO, and not have to worry about who paying for what. Please. If I was called to that, please believe I'll be living my best life.
Yes, run your race. Run your race.
Whatever God has called you to, do that.
Yeah. And that's why even for me, I know I'm called to this space. And also, I'm still called to do and have a desire to serve babies. It just can't. God was like, your job cannot be your God. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Like, who? Right? But like, I love being a nurse practitioner. I'm calling Tatum. Something wrong, huh? Anything? Labs? Huh? I'm calling anybody. Y'all kids good. Let me use that part of my brain. Like, I love it here. But we cannot get caught up. My thing right now is like, it's authenticity over algorithms. Like, you may just want to have a little passion product where you like a little side hustle where you make the cups and you sell them on Etsy, and it doesn't have to be this huge big. I'm gonna take over. There are people who worked jobs who leave generational wealth for their children. It's about stewardship, not you being an entrepreneur. Because if you go bankrupt because you're not doing this right, you're still going to get the opposite of what you think you're going after. And so I love that you have to have standards. And what I realized over this year was like what I thought were my standards were not. you can redefine that as your life changes, as Tatum said. Like, I thought when I was working 12-hour night shifts, I was like, man, I can't wait till I work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Got there, was like, I hate this. I need to be off for doctor's appointments. And I'd like, no, I got to go to the grocery store. People are there. Yuck. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, when do these people go to work? Oh, well, I'm at work too? That's ghetto. And so now I'm so grateful because God has shown me that freedom matters to me. I don't like being on call. I like to be home when I'm home. I like to be present with my husband as we are preparing to build our family out. There are just some things that I thought in my life that I would be okay with, and I'm not. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to redefine what's cool and what isn't. It was the goal. I got the degree. Okay, I'm degreed up. Great. But now what God has shown me is that I have I'm also the CEO of my license and where I practice and how I use it. And so there's just so much freedom in God. Like there's so much freedom. Yes, you submit these things, but a lot of the stuff that I thought I wanted, I went to God and I was like, you're right, I sure didn't even want that, huh? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to you for not answering prayers that I thought I wanted answered, because wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I know we're talking a lot about the work that needs to be done. How important is it to be uncompromising in your rest in a world that teaches us the opposite? And then what are some ways that you would recommend trying to achieve that as well?
Man, this is something that I have to very consciously pay attention to for myself, because I think what gets difficult is when you love what you do, it's hard to separate from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, dang, how do I rest or take a break from something I'm excited to go to every day? And so rest is extremely important. Overall, just taking care of yourself. And one of the things I talk about in the book, in the blueprint, when we talk about priorities, your well-being is a priority. We can't be so busy doing that we don't just be. We're human beings, not human doing. So you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Honor God by honoring your temple. I talk about eating well, paying attention to what you put into your body, going to therapy, prioritizing your mental health. That's something that has been big for me, because I realized a problem with myself is what I said. It's like, I love what I do. I'm excited about it, but also I do understand that I have to disconnect from it. And one thing that I realized was an issue was that I've been entrepreneurial or building brands or something since like 20. And so I'm 30 now. The last 10 years, I've been building brands and building a business and all of these different things. So much of my identity over this core period of time of my life has been about business and what I wanted to do. It shifted to be more so what God wanted me to do, but God called me to business. So it's still the same thing. And what I realize now as an adult with my family and wanting to grow my family and my business being in a place to where I'm not in the beginning stages anymore, it's like, this cannot be as much of my identity as it is. It just simply cannot be. So one of the reasons why I went to therapy was to really just try to figure out this whole concept about rest and just even more boundaries to protect myself. Because I had the basics, like I said, I eat right, I take trips, I go to sleep every night, I drink my water, I exercise. The foundation and the basics of taking care of myself, I got it. But really just fully leaning into being a human being, being Tatum, besides outside of what I can do or what people want me to do for them, has been something that is a new learning opportunity for me. And so going to therapy has been huge for me, because it allows me to prioritize myself and also just work through some of the things that I'm noticing. And so I always suggest therapy to everyone, because it's just good to have a non-biased third party who can just expose your blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
Because the unfortunate part about my life is I don't have too many people who will call me out on things and who will see past what I may be presenting.
Yeah.
My husband, he just, whatever it makes you the happiest is what it is for him. So whatever makes me happy, he down for it.
Yeah.
And that's great. He's a great husband, but sometimes I need to be, pulled up for a second and be like, hey, I noticed this, and I think you need to pay attention to that. I don't have too many people that's really going to call me out on stuff. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to go to therapy because I wanted somebody who didn't know me and who really didn't have any stakes in, in what was going on, to really just be able to see me
Yeah.
and help me work through some of the things that I felt like I was coming up against. And so that's been very helpful for me. And that's something that I would suggest everybody do, is go to therapy and really just prioritize being a human being. And that looks different for every person. Something
Mhm.
I did when I first had my son that was beneficial to me was I created what I call a happy list, because I had found myself right after I had my son. I had towards the end, I had gestational hypertension, so high blood pressure. After I had him, I had to go back to the hospital because I had postpartum preeclampsia. Once I finally was discharged from there and I got back home, I was dealing with a lot of PTSD. I had never had any health issues my whole life. My C-section was my first surgery. Most of my family is healthy. My grandmother getting cancer a couple of years ago, or last year, I think, was the first year or the first time I've dealt with even a sick family member. Like, my family is, everybody's healthy. And for my whole life, I've always been healthy. So this was the first time where, like, oh my gosh, sickness, disease, something that's potentially life threatening had presented itself to me in any way. And I was very scared by it.
Yeah.
And I was dealing with this PTSD because this reality hit of I could not be here to see my son grow up. I could not be here to, and it was just really, really a hard time. And
Yeah.
in addition to that, my emotions already being out of whack because of my hormones, I would find myself just like crying. And I remember one time BJ was like, you ain't smiled in like a few days. And that's unlike me. I'm always cracking jokes. So he was like, I got the baby. Like, I need you to go find something to do and don't come back until you found it. And I got in the car and I drove to like a parking lot because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know, like, I couldn't dig myself out of the crisis when I was in the middle of it. And that led me eventually to my happy list, because what it was for me was something that I didn't have to think about. It was just a list that I had, to where if I needed something to bring me some joy, if I was in the middle of something or whatever, I just went there. Because it's hard to think about stuff when you're going through it. Like,
Yeah.
what's going to make me happy right now? I don't know. I can't see past the fact that I almost died.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
what do
That's
you mean? Like, what do you mean go somewhere? Where am I going?
He's like, do whatever you got to do.
And so for that day, all I did was go to, I think I went to the parking lot, cried. I think I went and got some ice cream because I was by a cold stove. And then I went back home. Like, where am I going? But once I got out my feelings a bit, I was like, okay, let me figure this out. And I just wrote a simple list of things that I like. And it's not expensive, extra, something as simple as going to Target with no list, or driving down the street. I love to go for a drive when it's like a clear road. I could roll my windows down. It's nice outside, put the sunroof open, listen to like some 90s and 2000s music. I love podcasts. So just driving around, listening to something that's entertaining was on the list. Of course, there were things that cost money on there, like going to the spa, or taking a trip or whatever. But just taking a second to tap into who I am and what I like outside of what I do, and the responsibilities that I have, was helpful. And it's a list that I just pull from often. I like to go out to eat, so you can always find me somewhere eating good. So, like, just having that happy list was important to me. And it's something I tell other people to do as well. Because again, when you're in the thick of it, you can't always figure out like how to pull yourself out. But just simply having those practical things that just put you back in tune with being versus doing is very helpful.
I love that. Yes. Because we got to be uncompromising all the way around.
All the way around.
All the way around.
Nothing
Well,
being left on the table.
come on. Per usual, you came and just gave all the gems. Where can people get your new book? She is Uncompromising. Where can they follow you, get connected, do all the things?
Yep, you can follow me on Instagram at Tatum Temia, TatumTemia. You can get the book at tatumtemia.com/book. Again, TatumTemia.com/book. I did a masterclass where I really just taught on the blueprint that I outline in the book, because I give you all the steps in the book, but I like to teach too. So I really broke down everything about the book in that masterclass that you get when you purchase it. And I think that's everything. Of course, listen to the Blessed and Bossed Up podcast.
Yeah.
If you want to start a podcast, go to anchormedia.com. I think that's everything. Covered it all.
See, thank you so much. And that is it for this week's episode. And we'll see you next week. Bye.